The 2026 Formula 1 car is officially revealed by the FIA. A change in the aerodynamics, the chassis and the 50-50 split in the power unit. The car has changed dramatically. Things that we have come accustomed to in Formula 1 will be removed for this regulation period. And it will be quite the change on track for overtaking. But also, how the cars are worked on and the development rate from the teams, we are going to cover everything. We know about this from the aerodynamic department to the chassis as well as the power unit, which we are already pretty familiar with. If you are new here, I would love if you follow this podcast. We are doing amazing on the episodes, and thank you so much for the support. You have always been the best community, and genuinely you make my day every single time I upload these new episodes. I know I have not been regular with the episodes, but I am totally sorry for that. But this is quite exciting, so let's get into it. 2026 regulations for Formula 1 aerodynamics is the first thing that I want to go into these cars. And from there, we can move on to the rest with chassis and power unit. How the aerodynamics play a huge part in these regulations and such a major change to Formula 1. As we know it, this car can dramatically look different to the version 3 we saw back in November, around the time of Las Vegas GP. As I just stated, that was the version 3. And we are about 10 versions ahead of it. So this is version 10 of the car, and obviously this is just a regular standard render of the car, and we will see much more upgraded versions from the teams when they will be able to innovate on these cars. The front wing element is actually similar to that of the Audi concept car, as they have kept these end plates to try and prevent as much outwash coming out from the end plates. But I can see a lot of concern with people saying that the tires could definitely get shredded up if there is any other impact at all. We can definitely see a lot more punches within these cars because of these end plates. But the overall purpose of them is to try and help them with the dirty air, which is the big taking point from these 2026 cars. The air drag has been significantly reduced and the overall downforce is 30% down to what it is used to be in the front wing, and is also much narrow and in comparison to before of the 2022 season. As they comply with that very fat nose almost with like Formula 2. But what we are missing here and what used to be prominent in the cars of 2022 regulations is those wheel arcs. They have actually been removed, but there is some wheel body that will be mandated to help achieve optimal wake performance from the front of the car. So they are still focusing on the front of the car, obviously, not producing as much bad air as possible. As these cars get developed, we will see the next big thing. And naturally in Formula 1, dirty air will always be a thing, no matter what you try to do. We did see that in 2022 how much closer cars could get, even if you weren't the fastest car on the straight. If you were able to keep up in the corners, DRS was really important. We always saw that with Charles and Max, so it does contribute a big factor as for teams following closer and being able to overtake more on the straights. To the biggest change, these cars aerodynamically is definitely in the floor. Where you look at it, obviously the first thing you are going to see is when you look at the partially flat floor, and that is called as washing wheel wake control boards, and that is a pretty big name for it, at least what they are calling it right now. Control boards to be able to have the air in through the side of the car rather than having as much outwash as we have now, which also causes a lot of dirty air that does also partially come from the bottom of the floor. They have significantly reduced the power of those Venturi tunnels that will not be seeing on these cars with the partially flat floor. There will be a diffuser, but this diffuser is going to be nothing like we saw before. I think this will also help in the wet weather racing, because we have seen that to be such a big problem with these diffusers, and really the floor era that in wet weather, the amount of water being shot up with them even attempting to try and combat this with those wheel covers that looked horrendous. it was still a big issue. The diffuser just spews out too much water for it. This will also reduce the amount of reliance on the ultra stiff car, which we saw complaints from both Max. We saw the complaints from Lewis Hamilton also. It's been a constant complaint in these new regulations from the start that these cars are really killing drivers back. That should be a way less of an issue, with the floor being a little bit flatter and less reliance on the floor. The front wing and rear wing element that they have introduced right now is much different, but also way less downforce can be produced from the whole as a car, as I said 30% earlier. The active rear wing is a 3-element rear wing, which is a difference to before, as we can see that the end plates on that rear wing are now simplified. They are not like 2017 regulations because they are trying to reduce the amount of dirty air coming out of those end plates. But it is also a major change from what we have in 2022, where there were no real end plates to the rear wing, and the focus was on curving the air up to have less dirty air. But the biggest talking point we have now seen with the car, the aerodynamic elements we can see right now are super basic, and we will see this obviously advanced and upgraded as teams get a hands on the new cars, and innovation plays a big factor. But what will be on every single 2026 car is active aerodynamics, and in a very major way, in something very different to what we have had before. We will now have a moving front wing and a moving rear wing in the car. But it will not be like DRS. It will be used to actually shed the drag on any single straight that is activated by the drivers, kind of like DRS, but the actual way of overtaking is not done by the rear wing. And the front wing of every single car will have this, whether it's a leading car or the car at the very back. There is no 1 second difference. There are now just modes that drivers can use. The standard Z mode is the mode with the rear wing and front wing closest to give most amount of downforce. But X mode is now the low drag configuration to help you maximize the straight line speed. Teams are trying to reduce the rear part of their car to help with straight line speed. But now this will be a major component on every single car to help reduce drag, but also increase top speed, looking at the chassis design and how this helps into the aerodynamics. It will be smaller and lighter than the current generation of cars. We are going from 3600 mm to 3400 mm, while the width have also been reduced from 2000 mm to 1900 mm. The maximum floor will be reduced by 150 mm as well, which is the major change on the floor design. This should make the car more nimble, as they have said it earlier. And the weight reduction has always been a goal for these 2026 cars for a long period of time. And it will go down by 30 kilos on their counterparts from 2022. This is made up of 722 kilos of car and driver plus 46 kilos estimated tire mass, and as I said, the downforce will be reduced and the whole of drag will be reduced by 55%. The wheel inches will be same, like 18 inches, and the width will be actual 25 mm. So this will be together with aerodynamics, active aerodynamics. It will be very interesting to see in this cars. There should be more nimble drivers, should be able to throw their cars much more effectively, but it's going to be very tricky when it comes to the power unit. And why there is so much reliance on aerodynamics? Now, some of the negative parts of what I have already seen people are saying is the reliance on the straight line speed, which begs the question that the power unit, and it is being now 50-50. So obviously this is all to simplify the power units to help the global warming, and in general Formula 1 is trying to present itself in a green way. Most people have said to go with the V8, just make it naturally sustainable, which everybody would love to see, that I would personally love to see. But this is what we are getting in these 2026 regulations, and what the power unit will actually give you, and the new DRS system in the manual override mode that is going to try and make overtaking opportunities. That is definitely going to get harder, and an overtake with a manual mode rather than the DS, it's going to get tricky. The DRS gave you a lot of straight line speed sometimes more than 20 kilometers from the car that is ahead of you. But this will definitely be interesting, and with that low amount of drag going into those straight braking zones will be judged very differently in these new cars. And what it has done is to attract new people to the sport. We have now 6 engine manufacturers, which are Honda returning with Aston Martin, and 2 new ones being Audi and Red Bull, and all companies accompanied by Alpine, Mercedes and Ferrari. In all reading, these changes in 2026 car as a whole does seem as a step in a right direction. Obviously, nobody is going to be happy about the power units. We all love a very aggressive sound. They do say the sound should be much better in these cars, but I do believe that I'm not sure that V6 could ever generate a sound of V8, V10 or V12. And that will be actually appealing to Formula 1 audience or a motorsport audience in general. The chassis and aerodynamics is definitely playing a big part. Seeing active aero and in the front and the rear wing will be interesting change. But something that I'll definitely be keeping my eye on is if this will actually promote better racing. I do think the reduction in downforce is definitely the right way, and the reduction in kilos and making the cars more nimble. I think we are in for some fun. Hopefully, the power unit doesn't play a much big contributing factor that we have already seen like something in 2014 Mercedes. But I'm excited to say the least I got to be optimistic about it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the ask a question section for these 2026 regulations. So that's it for today. Give it a like and follow. It would mean the world for me. And do rate this podcast. Take care and keep being awesome.